Life is messy. Relationships are messy. And at the center of it all, we're trying to connect, love, and live in harmony. But sometimes in the pursuit of connection, we forget to listen to one of the most important voices in the room, our own. Have you ever found yourself sitting across from someone, your stomach in knots, your spirit feeling smaller with every passing minute, and yet you stayed? You stayed because the idea of leaving felt scarier than enduring the discomfort. I've been there. And let me tell you, ignoring that quiet voice inside us, the one that whispers, "This isn't okay," doesn't silence it. It just gets louder, and eventually it starts screaming. Tonight, I want to talk about the 7 signs that it's time to honor that voice. 7 signs that it's okay, no, it's necessary to cut all contact with someone. This isn't about blame. It's not about being perfect or expecting others to be perfect. It's about boundaries, self-respect, and the courage to step away when someone no longer holds space for you with love, respect, and kindness. Let's start with the first sign. If someone dismisses your feelings over and over again, it cuts deeper than you might realize. At first, it may seem small, a comment brushed off, a concern ignored, a slight laugh when you try to share something important. You tell yourself it's not worth making a big deal out of, but then it happens again and again. Every time it happens, it feels like a tiny piece of your voice is being silenced. They might say, "You're too sensitive," or "It's not that serious." They might roll their eyes when you speak or change the subject when you're vulnerable. It's subtle, almost unnoticeable in the moment, but the impact isn't small. You start questioning yourself. Am I overreacting? Maybe I'm asking for too much. But let me tell you something. Being heard is not asking for too much. Feeling respected is not too sensitive. When someone dismisses your feelings repeatedly, it's not just a bad day or a misunderstanding. It's a pattern, and patterns reveal something deeper. Over time, these small acts of dismissal add up to something big. They create a space where your emotions don't feel safe, where your thoughts aren't valued, where you begin to shrink yourself just to keep the peace. The truth is, respect isn't optional in a healthy relationship. It's the foundation. Without it, there's no trust, no openness, no real connection. And when someone consistently undermines that foundation, they're not just ignoring your feelings. They're telling you in their own way that your feelings don't matter. But they do matter. They matter because they're yours. Your emotions, your voice, your experience, these are sacred. No one has the right to minimize them, especially not someone you care about. It's easy to dismiss chronic disrespect as a quirk or a flaw, but it's more than that. It's a sign that something is off. And patterns, as small as they may seem, deserve our attention. Because when someone shows you who they are over and over again, you owe it to yourself to believe them. Emotional manipulation is one of the most insidious forms of harm in a relationship. It doesn't start with grand gestures or obvious attacks. It begins quietly, almost unnoticeably, with a few well-placed words or actions that make you doubt yourself. You try to express your feelings, but somehow the conversation turns back on you. Instead of being heard, you're told that's not what happened. Or worse, you're imagining things. Gaslighting makes you question your own reality. The things you were so sure of the way you felt, what you saw, what you experienced, suddenly feel shaky. You start second-guessing yourself, wondering if you're the problem. And that's exactly what manipulation thrives on. It's not just about control, it's about making you believe that control is normal. Then there's guilt tripping. You set a boundary and somehow you're made to feel selfish. You express a need and you're told you're being unreasonable or ungrateful. The weight of their disappointment presses down on you until you cave, giving up a piece of yourself just to keep the peace. And then there's the weaponization of your vulnerabilities. The moments you shared in trust, the things you revealed in your most unguarded state, they use those against you. Perhaps it's a fear you confided in them, only for it to be thrown back in your face during an argument. Or maybe it's your dreams and aspirations, dismissed as unrealistic when it suits their narrative. What's most painful about emotional manipulation is how personal it feels. It cuts to the core, leaving you feeling isolated, small, and confused. But let me tell you this, manipulation is not love. Love doesn't make you question your worth or reality. Love doesn't use your pain as leverage. Love doesn't twist your emotions to serve its own agenda. Manipulation erodes trust, the cornerstone of any healthy relationship. And without trust, what's left? A shell of connection, held together by fear, doubt, and confusion. If you find yourself constantly doubting your feelings, your memories, or your instincts around someone, it's not because you're too sensitive. It's because their actions are designed to make you feel that way. And that's not love. That's control. Negativity in a relationship is like a slow, relentless drip of poison. It doesn't hit you all at once. Instead, it seeps into your life bit by bit until one day you realize you feel smaller, heavier, and more hopeless every time you interact with that person. It might begin with their words, a constant stream of complaints, criticisms, or pessimistic remarks that overshadow any glimmer of positivity. You share good news, and they find a way to diminish it. You express excitement, and they respond with doubt or cynicism. Over time, their negativity becomes the dominant energy in the room, and you feel yourself bracing for it before every interaction. It's not just the words, though. It's the energy they carry, the way they drain the air from a conversation, leaving you feeling like you've run a marathon just by sitting next to them. You might find yourself walking away from these encounters feeling heavy, or worse, questioning your own joy. Negativity has a way of creeping into your thoughts, making you second-guess your dreams, your decisions, even your self-worth. You begin to notice that no matter how much light you try to bring into the relationship, it's never enough to pierce their darkness. Your emotional resources, your patience, your kindness, your optimism feel like they're being siphoned off bit by bit. And here's the thing, relationships are supposed to nourish us. They're meant to be a place where we feel seen, supported, and uplifted. Not perfect, of course, but balanced. If every interaction leaves you feeling depleted, it's a sign that something is deeply wrong. Sometimes negativity comes from someone's own pain, their unhealed wounds spilling into the space between you. And while compassion is important, it's not your job to carry their burden at the expense of your own peace. You can't be the one to fix them, especially if their negativity is pulling you under. You have to ask yourself, does this relationship feed my soul or deplete it? And if the answer is the latter, it's okay to step back, because your energy, your light, and your joy are worth protecting, even if that means letting go of someone who can't see the good in life or in you. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are bridges to healthier relationships built on respect and understanding. They say, this is where I feel safe. This is what I need to thrive. But what happens when someone doesn't honor those lines? What happens when someone crosses them again and again, as if they don't exist? At first, you might give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they didn't understand your boundary. Maybe it was a one-time mistake, but then it happens again. And again, each time you feel a little more disrespected, a little more invisible. You say, I'm not comfortable with this, but they push anyway. You say, please don't do that, but they brush it off as if your words carry no weight. Boundaries are there to protect your peace, your energy, your well-being. When someone bulldozes through them, it's not just about the act itself. It's about what it reveals. It reveals that their needs, their desires, and their comfort matter more to them than yours do. It reveals a lack of respect for the space you've asked for, and it reveals a willingness to put their agenda above your emotional safety. The thing about boundaries is they're not always easy to set. They require courage. They require self-awareness. And most of all, they require belief that you are worthy of being protected. So when someone disregards your boundaries, it's not just frustrating, it's painful. It can make you question your right to ask for what you need. It can make you wonder if you're being too rigid, too demanding, or too much. But let me tell you this, you are not too much. Your boundaries are not unreasonable. They are an expression of self-respect. And anyone who truly values you will see them as such. When someone consistently violates your boundaries, it's a sign of deeper issues. It's a sign that they may not be capable or willing to respect you in the way you deserve. And while it's tempting to keep explaining, keep hoping, keep forgiving, there comes a point where you have to protect yourself. Because your peace, your safety, and your well-being are worth more than any relationship that refuses to honor them. Toxic behavior isn't just an occasional misstep. Lying erodes trust. Cheating shatters safety. Cruelty, whether through words or actions, chips away at your sense of worth. At first, you might try to rationalize it. Maybe they were stressed. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe, just maybe, you can help them change. But toxicity doesn't fade because of your efforts. It lingers, festers, and grows, often pulling you deeper into its grip. When someone lies to you, they aren't just hiding the truth. They're undermining the foundation of your connection. Because how can you build trust when the ground keeps shifting beneath your feet? When someone cheats, they don't just break a promise. They fracture the bond of commitment, leaving you to carry the weight of betrayal. And when someone acts with cruelty, whether it's sharp words, silent treatment, or outright aggression, it's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their inability to show kindness. But here's the hardest part. Toxic behavior often comes with excuses. I didn't mean it. I was just upset. You know, I love you. Those words can make you doubt what you've seen and felt. They can make you stay longer than you should, hoping things will get better, hoping you can fix it. But let me tell you something, it's not your job to fix or change someone who chooses toxic patterns. It's not your responsibility to carry their pain, their anger, or their choices. Toxicity isn't something you can heal with love or patience. And it's not something you're meant to endure. When you hold on to someone who lies, cheats, or acts with cruelty, you're not just holding on to them. You're also holding on to their toxicity. And that weight isn't yours to carry. You deserve honesty. You deserve kindness. You deserve someone who doesn't hurt you and then expect you to pretend it didn't happen. Letting go isn't about giving up on them. It's about choosing yourself. Because no one's toxic behavior is worth the cost of your peace, your trust, and your sense of self. Abuse is never just a mistake or a moment of poor judgment. It's a deliberate act that causes harm, whether it's physical, emotional, or verbal. And no matter how it's dressed up, it is never acceptable. Physical abuse leaves marks you can see. Bruises, scars, or the silent flinch when someone raises their hand too quickly. But emotional and verbal abuse, they leave wounds that run deeper, cutting into your sense of self, your confidence, your ability to trust. It might start subtly. A harsh word disguised as a joke, a sharp tone explained away by stress, an angry outburst followed by flowers and apologies. You tell yourself it was a one-time thing. You want to believe the promises they make after the storm. I'll never do it again. I didn't mean it, I just lost control. But over time, a pattern begins to form. The apologies come, but the behavior never stops. The promises to change are made, but the harm keeps happening. And with every incident, a little more of your spirit gets chipped away. You start to question yourself. Was it really that bad? Did I provoke them? Am I overreacting? That's the insidious nature of abuse that makes you doubt your own reality. But let me say this as clearly as I can. If someone harms you physically, emotionally, or verbally, it is not your fault. It is not because you're too sensitive. It is not because you provoked them. It is not because you're difficult to love. Their actions are a reflection of their choices, not your worth. And no matter how many times they apologize, no matter how many promises they make, the damage doesn't disappear. It stays with you, a shadow that grows heavier with each cycle of harm and regret. Leaving isn't easy. It takes strength, courage, and often support from others. But staying in an abusive relationship costs you something far greater. It costs you your safety, your peace, your sense of who you are. You deserve to feel safe. You deserve love that doesn't hurt. And you deserve a life free from harm, no matter what someone else has made you believe. Accountability is the glue that holds relationships together. It's not about being perfect, it's about taking responsibility when things go wrong. But what happens when someone refuses to own their mistakes? When every conversation feels like a maze of excuses, deflections, or outright denial? It starts small. A forgotten promise, brushed off with, you're overreacting. A hurtful comment, dismissed with, I didn't mean it that way. And when you bring it up hoping for a conversation, they turn the tables. Suddenly, it's not about what they did. It's about how you're too sensitive, or how you didn't explain yourself well enough, or how their reaction was your fault to begin with. It's exhausting, because accountability isn't just about admitting fault. It's about respect. It's saying, I see how my actions affected you, and I care enough to make it right. But when someone refuses to take that step, it creates a wall that blocks growth, trust, and connection. Without accountability, you're left carrying the weight of every problem. You're the one apologizing even when you did nothing wrong. You're the one adjusting, tiptoeing, or bending over backward to keep the peace. And over time, that weight gets heavier. It leaves you feeling unseen, unheard, and completely alone in the relationship. People who deflect blame or avoid accountability often struggle with vulnerability. Owning their mistakes might feel too threatening, too exposing. But vulnerability is what builds connection. Without it, the relationship becomes one-sided, with you doing all the emotional work. And here's the truth, relationships thrive on accountability. They thrive when both people can say, I messed up. I'm sorry. Let's work on this together. If someone isn't willing to do that, they're showing you something important. They're showing you that their pride matters more than your trust, that their comfort matters more than your feelings, and that they're not ready for the kind of connection that requires humility, honesty, and effort. You can't force someone to take responsibility for their actions, but you can decide what you're willing to tolerate. Because a relationship without accountability isn't just frustrating, it's unsustainable. And you deserve more than that. A healthy relationship is like a dance. Both people step forward, take turns leading, and move together in harmony. But what happens when you're the only one dancing? When you're always the one reaching out, making plans, or fixing the cracks that appear? At first, you might not notice. You're happy to give, happy to put in the effort, happy to make things work. But over time, something shifts. You realize you're the one always initiating the calls, always checking in to see how they're doing, always trying to mend the misunderstandings or bring the relationship back to center. And what do you get in return? Excuses, indifference, or worse, silence. It's not just about the actions or lack thereof. It's about what those actions communicate. They say your effort matters more than mine. They say, I'll take what you give, but I won't give back. And slowly they leave you feeling unappreciated, unseen, like no matter how much you give, it will never be enough to inspire the same energy in return. Relationships should feel balanced, not perfectly equal all the time, that's impossible, but balanced in spirit. There will be seasons when one person gives more because the other is struggling. And that's okay, as long as the flow of energy eventually returns, but when the imbalance becomes the norm. When you're the one constantly carrying the weight of the connection, that's when the exhaustion sets in. Because giving without receiving doesn't just drain your energy, it drains your hope. It makes you question whether you're asking for too much when all you've ever wanted was mutual effort. But let me remind you, effort is a choice. Showing up is a choice. And when someone consistently chooses not to match your energy, it's not because you're unworthy. It's because they're unwilling. You deserve someone who meets you halfway, who reaches out to you as much as you reach out to them. Who cares enough to show, not just say, that the relationship matters to them? Unreciprocated energy isn't just unsustainable, it's unfair. And you deserve better than carrying a relationship all on your own. Sometimes the clearest warning doesn't come from words or actions. It comes from a feeling, a quiet, persistent sense that something isn't right. You can't always explain it. There may not be a specific event or moment to point to, but deep down you feel it. An uneasiness when they walk into the room, a tension in your chest when their name lights up your phone, a heaviness that lingers long after they've left. It's easy to dismiss that feeling, to tell yourself you're overthinking, being too sensitive, or imagining things. You might even convince yourself that it's just your own insecurity, but your intuition isn't random. It's not paranoia or fear without reason. It's your internal compass guiding you towards safety and truth. That gut feeling exists to protect you. It picks up on subtle patterns, tones, expressions, behaviors that your conscious mind might overlook. It whispers when something feels off, even if everything seems fine on the surface. When you ignore it, that whisper doesn't go away. It grows louder. It starts to show up in sleepless nights, in the pit in your stomach, in the way your heart races when you're around them. You try to rationalize it. Maybe they didn't mean to hurt you. Maybe they're just going through a tough time. Maybe things will get better if you're more understanding, more patient, more forgiving. But the uneasiness remains, because deep down, you know that a relationship that feels wrong in your gut will never feel right in your soul. You don't have to wait for a concrete reason to trust your feelings. You don't need proof, a dramatic incident, or a final straw. That gut feeling is enough. It's your body's way of saying, pay attention, protect yourself, trust it, even if it means stepping away, even if it means letting go, because ignoring your intuition doesn't make the danger disappear. It only makes you stay in a place where your heart feels unsafe, your spirit feels heavy, and your peace feels out of reach. You deserve to feel at ease. You deserve relationships that don't leave you questioning your worth or your safety. And if your gut tells you otherwise, it's time to listen. Self-betrayal doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow unraveling, a series of small compromises you make to keep someone in your life. You tell yourself it's not a big deal, that bending your boundaries is just part of maintaining the relationship. That staying quiet when they cross the line will keep the peace. But every time you ignore your inner voice, every time you put their comfort above your own, you give away a piece of yourself. At first, it feels manageable. You think, I can handle this. But the more you give, the more they take. And the less you recognize the person staring back at you in the mirror, your values start to feel negotiable. Your peace becomes an afterthought. And your sense of self fades into the background, buried beneath the weight of keeping them happy. It's not just exhausting, it's heartbreaking. Because deep down, you know what you're giving up. Your time, your energy, your ability to stand firm in who you are. You convince yourself it's worth it, that the relationship matters more than your discomfort, that their approval is more important than your truth. But self-betrayal doesn't lead to connection. It leads to resentment. You start to resent them for asking so much. And you start to resent yourself for giving it. Here's the hard truth: if being in someone's life requires you to betray your values, your peace, or your sense of self, the cost is too high. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you're selfish. It means you understand your worth. It means you recognize that your values are not negotiable, that your peace is not a luxury, it's a necessity, that your sense of self is not something you can afford to lose. You deserve relationships that honor who you are, not ones that force you to shrink, silence, or sacrifice yourself. Because the person you are, your true, unfiltered self, is worth protecting. And if staying in contact with someone means losing that, it's time to let go. Choosing to cut contact with someone is never easy. It's not a decision made out of anger or spite, but out of self-respect and preservation. Because every relationship in your life should add to your sense of peace, not take away from it. It should uplift, not tear down. It should honor who you are, not demand you compromise that. Walking away can feel like loss, but it's also a step toward freedom, toward reclaiming your energy, your values, and your sense of self. You're not shutting the door on love or connection, you're making space for the right kind of love. The kind rooted in mutual respect, effort, and care. The kind that allows you to show up fully without fear or compromise. Trust yourself in this process. Trust your gut. Trust your peace. Because at the end of the day, the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself. And you deserve to protect that above all else,